Say hi, Glenda.
Hi.
Smile.
On July 4th, 1909, Daniel Burnham would unveil the Plan of Chicago, the beginning of urban planning here. Basically, Burnham was taking us from an agrarian to an industrial society, and things were changing so fast in these days, you needed a plan to carry it out. The Plan of Chicago. Burnham looked at Lake Michigan, the Chicago River surrounding prairies, and mapped it out. He would see the river as the focal point of the city. And Daniel Burnham's own words from the Plan of Chicago, 1909, not to get too Ken Burns on you, but grand and noble architecture should rise up along the riverbanks and be followed by grand and noble boulevards as well. Daniel Burnham, 1909. Those boulevards today are Wacker Drive and Michigan Avenue. We'll see those. We'll see how Chicago actually gained its title, the birthplace of the skyscraper in the late 1800s. Now that, my friends, was not really a plan. That was more of an accident, what we call the Great Conflagration. The real turning point in Chicago history, October 8th, 1871. That was the date of the Great Chicago Fire. On that day of fire, supposedly started, me boys, by days, don't you know? Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a kerosene lantern, starting a fire that took out 17,450 buildings in a day and a half. That because of that fire, architects, engineers flocked here to rebuild. You had a blank slate upon which to try new building technique. And you needed something new. After the fire, you weren't allowed to rebuild with wood in downtown Chicago. And depending on brick, masonry meant that at your base, your wall would have to increase 6 inches every time you had a new floor. You're going to lose all your floor space to support. Sullivan describes it thusly: your building should be like a Greek column, a tripartite division of base, shaft, capital, or roof area, every inch a proud and soaring thing. The Chicago School goes on to influence the birthplace of modernism, the Bauhaus, which was a very famous art compound in 1920s Germany, long before it became a 1980s post-punk industrial band of the same name. Now, the second director of the real Bauhaus, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, came to Chicago in 1938 from the Illinois Institute of Technology here, which spread that modern look around the globe. Look to Lake Point Tower on your right, the tallest condo of 1968 in the world, first curvilinear skyscraper. Shipwright and Heinrich, architects, former students and employees of Mies. And that's modernism right there, where you find highly articulated structure, but no decoration. The modernist felt decoration was bourgeois, superfluous, dishonest. They felt the building was honest and true when it expressed its materials. A word about Chicago's movable bridges, inspired by the bridges in Paris. This is called a trunnion bascule. Bascule is from the French for seesaw, and that's how this bridge works. It's got a counterweight. Move the counterweight, just like on a seesaw, and it can pop up in 2 minutes. Hey, we might see them going up today for the sailboats. That usually happens Wednesday and Saturday mornings. They open them through the end of the month of June. New wave of architecture coming into Chicago right now from a young woman. Her name is Jeannie Gang. Company Studio Gang. Look to your left, friends. Jeannie's first skyscraper, garnering worldwide attention. It's the one with that shimmering glass and those crazy wavy balconies. It's called the Aqua Building. Looks like a wave in motion. Form follows function, as Louis Sullivan would say. The function of Jeannie's building here was to give every one of those floors a unique view of Chicago. So the form, the balconies were determined by working from the outside in. Jeannie and assistants would find a view like Millennium Park downtown. Then using models, they would point a laser back at the building. Now if the laser went in your window, that was cool. You had a sight line. If it hit the wall, still cool. Jeannie literally would build you an accessible balcony 50 stories up. In some places they go 12 feet out, so you could step out and have a view. And friends, here's a prime example of modernism. Look up the steps to Big John, the John Hancock Center. Notice for its truss tube exterior support system. 1,127 feet, 100 stories. Now, you just saw 46,000 tons of steel right there, and not 1 ounce of decoration. That's that modern style where you celebrate structure. Postmodern Art Deco is NBC Tower to your right. Adrian Smith, architect for Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, harking back to the Art Deco of the 30s. I bet you know 30 Rock, the GE building in New York. You'll see that. You should look at the front with the NBC Peacock. That was an inspiration. And coming up on our right, friends, the Clock Tower. London can have Big Ben, Paris its Eiffel Tower. I'm a Chicagoan. I'll take the Clock Tower of the one and only Wrigley Building. Commissioned indeed by the chewing gum king William Wrigley Jr., who was a young man had gone to Burnham's Wonderful Fair. He brought that Beaux-Arts elegance right downtown. The clock tower, the Wrigley Building, modeled after the Spanish Renaissance, the 11th century Giralda Tower in Sevilla, Spain. And to our right, it looks like a Gothic Cathedral Tribune Tower, home to the Chicago Tribune newspaper. 1922, Colonel McCormick of the Tribune offered $100,000 in the worldwide design contest for the most beautiful office building in the world. Howells and Hood of New York won out of 264 entries. Now, everything was suggested from ancient Egyptian to Bauhaus, the modern style. Howells and Hood of New York were inspired by the Gothic cathedrals of France and Belgium, specifically the Mother of the Rhone Cathedral, the one that Joan of Arc is usually associated with. Speaking of France, we still call our Grand Boulevard Michigan Avenue Boule Mich, inspired by the Grand Boulevards of Paris. We have named the bridge the Sabo Bridge, however, before we honor the founder of Chicago, our first permanent resident, the French-speaking fur trader from Haiti, Jean-Baptiste Pontou Sabo, started a fur trading empire right there where the Tribune Tower sits in 1779. From Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, looming on our right with Spire is the new second tallest building in Chicago. For the life of me, I cannot remember its name. Oh wait, it's Trump International Hotel and Tower, New York financier and fading television star. The modernists who didn't like squares, hence the curvilinear design for Marina City Towers, which would earn their nickname in 1967. You see why we call these the Corncob Towers. And right here, the student rejects his teacher. Although Goldberg had studied with Mies van der Rohe, he found Bach's psychological slums. The circle would bring people together. Fans of the Chicago band Wilco will recognize him from the CD cover of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. You'll notice Marina City to be a complete city. Everything is at your fingertips at home. Docking for boats. Are you hungry? You have 4 restaurants, a bowling alley, a swimming pool, a bank, office space, the House of Blues Musical Theater, and your living space upstairs. Goldberg did Marina City at the height of the mass migration when the middle class kept leaving the city for the suburbs. He was trying to help reverse that trend because without a strong middle class, you will never have a great city. Bertrand Goldberg realized people would stay downtown if you could offer 24-hour urban living. The River Industrial, he gave you that option at home. The West. I keep my hotel like hell, yay! Well, friends, it was at that Saguenash Hotel. 13 electors gathered one day in 1833. The vote was 12 against 1 to incorporate. So on March 4th, 1837, Chautauqua, the place of the stinking onion, became Chicago, the city for everybody. We're going to tour just a bit of the North Branch, and as you look around you, you see this industrial river with river barges still plying their trade, undergoing a residential renaissance. Now, the project on our right is going to be not 1, not 2, but count them 3 residential buildings, beginning with its 50-story rental unit here. This is called Wolf Point Tower, and then they'll add a 750-foot condo on the east and 950-foot condo on the tip. Hey, now here's a single-leaf bascule railroad bridge, so you can actually see how the seesaw works with that counterweight, yeah? Now, this one's no longer in use, but indeed, this was the Chicago Galena Union Railroad, 1848, first depot in Chicago. Used right up into the 90s, still carrying newsprint for the newspapers. Today, it's simply a piece of urban sculpture scaring the people who live across the way at Fulton House, 1981, one of the very first loft conversion units in Chicago. Note the 3-foot-thick masonry walls. This building was built in 1908 as a refrigerated warehouse for 70 years. Architect Harry Weiss had to defrost it for a whole year, just like your freezer, and they had to strip a ton of horsehair off. Horsehair, wonderful insulation. If your horse will give it up. Harry Weiss, inspired by a single tree on the riverbank, did what I consider the 4 coolest townhomes in Chicago. These are called the River Cottages. Can you tell this architect was a sailor? Triangular skylights like schooner sail porthole windows. Harry Weiss would say water is a magnet, it will draw people to it. Harry got it. And we human beings have a Jungian archetype. We all seem to long for the sea, the original source, the blue, the azure. And if you don't have an ocean at home, my friends, sometimes a river is enough. I'll leave you with that thought. Respecting my neighbors at Kinsey Park means I'm going off mic for 5 minutes. This is a great time to visit Zap, your bartender. He indubitably, indeed, has a pleasing plethora. Today on Elston Avenue, Morton Salts. When it rains, it pours. Indeed, an air rights project. You know what happened really? Chicago gave the railroads all this prime riverfront land. The deal, that would make us the railroad hub of America. You couldn't take a single train from New York to California back in the day. You had to change trains in Chicago. And surprise, if you got off a train in Chicago, your pocketbook, your wallet suddenly got lighter. You bought breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you got a hotel room. You left a little jack, a few dead presidents, a little money behind. Air rights means exactly what you think. You have the right to buy the air from the railroad. You got to stay out of the way. On the way back, you'll notice that they had a problem with this building. The far corner overhangs the switching yard, couldn't support the weight from the ground. They lifted it from the ceiling. There's rolled steel truss up there. Some of you might see it right now. That's called a cantilever. It's holding the weight of the building up. The train will then pass under, on our right, the first air rights project in Chicago, the Art Deco Chicago Daily News building. First building to offer a public plaza as well. Hey, look to your left. The skyline drops off. You know, that's because the business district is really behind you now. I want to impress upon you that in Chicago, necessity was the mother of invention. You know, one of the main reasons Chicago really became a skyscraper city? We had to. We were locked in. Your business district had borders. The river you're on was the northern border. The lake was east, south, and west. You were cut off by railroad tracks. Now, if you were in business, you wanted to squeeze downtown where the action was, right? Well, think of it this way. Think way, especially my younger passengers, think way back, before cell phones, before email, even before text messaging. Remember when business was the art of the handshake, the deal. You would meet your customer not Facebook to Facebook, but face to face. In my day, we had two human beings in the same room. OMG, imagine that, LOL sin. We had no choice in Chicago. We couldn't sprawl out, so we sprawled up. A tip of the hat is due to Mr. Otis, too, don't you think? Without the Otis elevator, you'd still be on the first floor. By the way, Otis Elevator has a regional office up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's only a one-story building. I find that incredibly sad. Have you guessed the architect of River City from 1986? I bet you can, because you know his work. Who liked concrete and reinforced steel, expressionistic like a sculptor? Bertrand Goldberg, who did the corncob-shaped Marina City Towers, yeah? Goldberg, the modernist, thinking outside the box. In his journal of the 1960s, when his teacher, Mies van Dro, and his peers were doing all those glass boxes, he would write, I am in rebellion against the century of static. I am in rebellion against the straight line. I refuse to remake humanity in the image of a machine. He said River City came to him by nature. It was inspired by a snake. It would have looked serpentine had all 5 buildings expanding 400 meters to the next bridge being completed. You know what? He always danced to a different drummer. I think there's a direct line of influence from Antonio Gaudi to Bertrand Goldberg and thinking outside the box. Oh, friends, real quick, can you get a picture of that squat building with an orange wall? See that tiny building in the distance? That's the Chicago Fire Academy over on DeKalb Street. That's where firemen get their training. That's the radio tower of the Fire Academy. Tallest building in America, 10th in the world today. I give you the one, the only, the
Cheers.
Tower. It's 1,451 feet. Thank you, but I have to be truthful. If Ayun from Tuva were here right now, he'd be shaking his head going, no, Kevin, more strong. 1,451 feet, 1,727 if you count the antenna. Aha! We are not allowed to count the antenna on the roof because the Council on Tall Buildings in the Urban Habitat only recognizes spires. As the architect designs the spire, an antenna might be an add-on. Didn't need it, still the tallest building in the world for 22 years. Construction technique, bundle tube system. Think of the building like a bundle of 6 wrapped together for strength. The building literally consists of 9, number 9, contiguous steel tubes, each is 65 foot square. 2 will terminate at 50 floors, 2 at 66, 3 at 90. The final 2, its entire distance, 110 stories. Now, why did they terminate the different sections? Because you're in the Windy City. Although, did you know the nickname for Chicago, Windy City, had nothing to do with the wind? It referred to our early politicians changing their mind whichever way the wind blows, and the fact that we Chicagoans are boosters of this city. Chicagoans are full of hot air, myself included. We never stop bragging.